And welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, healer, intuitive tarot reader, and professional witch, and today I'll be reviewing the 2025 5-card tarot spread I discussed in episode 1 of the podcast back on January 1st, 2025. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. If you love the show, the best way to support it for free is by listening daily, leaving a review, and subscribing or following in your favorite podcast app. You can get my free 2025 5-card tarot spread that I'm talking about today that I created just for you at the beginning of this year by joining my newsletter list. My newsletter always has the most up-to-date info on upcoming events, presentations, musings, and info and photos of my day-to-day life. If you want to join, you can click on the link in the show notes, or you can always go to my website, CamilleASaunders.com, to find the newsletter pop up there. I have opened up the podcast to have guests on now, as you've been hearing this season. So if you're interested or know someone that might be a good fit, you can fill out my form to be a guest on the podcast. If you're local and you want to meet me in person, you can join us for a New Year full moon healing circle this coming Saturday on January 3rd from 2 to 4 p.m. Step into the new year under the light of the first full moon, a sacred time for reflection, release, and renewal. As we enter 2026, the full moon invites us to pause and honor the turning of the cycle. Together, we'll reflect on the lessons of the past year, clear stagnant energy, and set powerful intentions for the year ahead. We're also going to be doing some crafting, which I'm very excited about. We meet at Thresholds Collective in Tacoma from 2 to 4 p.m., and tickets for the event are up now, and there are still spots available. So if you want to welcome in the new year with us this coming weekend, please sign up for that now. We would love to have you. You can find the links for any of these offers in the show notes or on my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot, in addition to the images of the cards I pull on each episode. All right, so let's get into this season. Welcome to season 20, where I'm interviewing guests and kind of wrapping up the podcast for this year. If you haven't listened to my other seasons yet, please check those out. If you want to talk tarot basics, you can check out season 1, where, like I said, I started my first episode doing a 2025 5-card tarot spread that I'm going to be reviewing in this episode. So if you want to check that one out first, check out season 1. In seasons 2 and 3, I went through all the major arcana cards and an overview of the 4 suits. Season 4 was all about tarot and pop culture. Season 5, I went through 13 common tarot spreads. Season 6, 7, 8, and 9, I went through all of the suit cards, starting with wands, then pentacles, swords, and cups. Season 10 was all about tarot and witchcraft. Season 11, tarot and plant allies. Season 12, tarot and animals. Season 13, Divination in the Harry Potter series. Season 14, Frequently Asked Questions. Season 15, Tarot Crystals. Season 16, Queer Deities. Season 17 was all about autumnal tarot spreads. Season 18 about color magic. And season 19 about all the different decks I have and how to use them. So like I said, we are here now in season 20, where I've been interviewing guests to talk about their views on tarot and how they use it. And then we're doing a couple episodes to wrap up 2025. So today I'm reviewing the 2025 5-card tarot spread that I laid out on episode 1 of this podcast back on January 1st, 2025, as I discussed. So grab your decks and go along with me. So in that episode, I pulled 5 cards to determine what the prompts would be for you to go along at home and pull your own cards to create this 2025 tarot spread. So I'm actually going to do 2 episodes. So today we're going to talk about the cards I pulled to create the prompts and talk about those and kind of the themes that we saw for this year. And then next episode, I'm going to pull 5 cards from those prompts, and we're going to do a review of what, my prompts created for the year and kind of look back at the year in that way. And then the next episode, we'll start looking towards 2026. creating a spread for 2026 like I did for this year. And then the following episode, I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to actually follow my own prompts and we're going to pull 5 cards together to see what the year ahead lies. Or maybe we're going to pull 6 cards. Who knows? I have not created that spread yet. So you'll get to see kind of all the process live. So again, in the first episode of the podcast, I pulled 5 cards from the Goddess of Love tarot deck by Gabriella Herstick and illustrated by Julie Popescu, in order to determine what our prompts would be for 2025. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, feel free to check that out, but I'll also be reviewing today of just kind of what cards I pulled. So all of the cards I pulled were in reverse. And which was interesting. And like I said, I used the Goddess of Love tarot deck, so they're all beautiful, pink, very Venusian, romance, sex, magic, love deck here. So yeah, let's just go through the cards and kind of see what did we glean from them. So for the first card I pulled, I'll put up to the camera here, the Hanged One, as it's known in this deck, or traditionally known as the Hanged Man. And of course, I pulled it in reverse. So when we look at the card, the person looks right side up, right? Which is very cool. We have here, so if you look at it, again, in reverse, the person looks kind of normal, although they have a tree at their feet and an ocean in the sky above them, right? So there's sort of this like a bit of a, I don't know, like typhoon or like tsunami kind of vibe to the card. We have the dolphins or porpoises going around the person, which is interesting because we actually have a lot of circular imagery in these cards that I pulled. So yeah, this was the first one I pulled. And so we won't talk about so much the prompts today since I'm going to do that next episode. But yeah, let's go ahead and take a look in the book about what they speak about with the Hanged One. So like I said, here we have the card. We have some nice yellow flowers. We have the water element. We have like an earth element there. We have this kind of like circling around aspect. And again, traditionally when I think about the Hanged One, when it's in its normal position where the person is upside down, it's all about seeing different perspectives or kind of like, again, turning things on its head to view something for the future. And I know, at least for me and a lot of people I know, going into 2025 was a bit of like, it was tumultuous a bit. There was a lot of fear about the incoming president, I would say. There was a lot of kind of like feeling like, I don't know if you've ever been in the ocean and caught in like a wave where you get kind of tumbled. It's quite scary, where you kind of don't know which way is up. There is like an aspect of that to this card of kind of being like, I don't know which way is up, which again, of course, is ironic considering this card is all about, right, which way is up and which way is down and like how do you perceive things, right? Here's, and in the reversal, the water is above our head and the earth element or the tree is kind of below our feet. So actually, perhaps we're feeling grounded, but we're not quite sure when that wave is going to hit, right? So there is this aspect of like, maybe hypervigilance, right? I'm looking around, trying to make sure, like, gotta look out for that wave. When's it coming? But also there's like a lot of balance to this card. Again, I'm going to keep showing it. But we have like symmetry, right? And again, the person is like standing on a tree, right? When we look at it in reverse like this. And they actually look quite like centered. They have a heart in one hand and a rose in the other. They have this kind of like halo of golden flower behind their head. So they actually are kind of like in a very meditative state, I would say, of kind of like, I'm going to find myself, right? I'm going to let the world kind of be tumultuous around me. And I'm going to see like what comes of that. Like, how do I, right, think about myself and my life and my habits? I know that's something we talked about in the first episode with the spread, like habits. And thinking about, yeah, how do we stay grounded when perhaps the world around us feels chaotic, tumultuous, unknown, and thinking about what we're going to see there. So that's kind of what I see in this card. Let's move on to the second one. So the second card I pulled was the 10 of Pentacles in reverse here. So if we look at it upright, we sort of have the like I think like the Venus or like feminine symbol where it's like a circle with like a cross underneath. Um, and then we have the 10 pentacles that are kind of like superimposed on top of it to create that same image again. We have roses, we have emeralds. So in this deck, emeralds are associated with the earth sign, the pentacles. So those are a sort of like green earth aspect. We have a snake, right, which again is all about that like circular energy. We have the literal circle here of the feminine symbol. We have the, or female, we have the pentacles, which are also circles here, and then we have this snake kind of winding at the bottom. And I'll show it again here. So this is upright. Of course, when we look at it reverse, it looks sort of strange because it's very like, I don't know, I was gonna say top heavy, but actually it's like bottom heavy. It also makes me, it starts to make me think more of like a womb. Um, which is interesting. Um, the goblet now that it's in the image is upside down, so right, it's not going to be functioning very well. You can't pour water into it. I'm going to check in the book to see for the reversal for the Ten of Pentacles if there's anything that feels relevant to add to this card. And again, we're just kind of looking at doing a review of the cards that I actually pulled, right? Again, I pulled cards and then created prompts out of them, which we'll talk about next episode. But in this one, I'm really just trying to look at the cards to be like, what happened this year and how does that relate to this card? So this says, right, when the card's reversed, it represents delusionment and a disenchantment, because usually the Ten of Pentacles upright is like a microcosm version of the World card, a vision of enchantment grounded in the earth. Again, we kind of have these very earthy elements. We have the snake here, we have the emeralds. We even just have like the female symbol or kind of like the biology of the body. And it says upright, it's all about the work you've done to get where you are, looking around and seeing what you've manifested, seeing the truth of the magic and the material and mundane, right? Pentacles are all about material successes. So it's about like legacy, right? Again, we kind of have these like, we have the roses, we have emeralds, we have like a chalice or like a goblet cup there. We have this feminine divine symbol. We have this snake, which, right, I always think about the Ouroboros, which is the snake eating its own tail, that like cyclical energy, which also happens kind of in the world card. And the world card is very circular, the card itself. It's the last card in the major arcana, kind of the completion of a cycle. So again, this is like a microcosm of that. The tens are also about the completion of the suit cycle, even though we have kind of court cards coming after that. Ace through 10 is kind of its own micro version of the major arcana journey, the hero's journey. And so when we think about it in reverse, right, the completion of a journey, but in reverse, it is this like different, it's almost like, oh, I thought I was done, but now I guess I'm not, right? Like this disillusionment, disenchantment. I think, again, when I think about early 2025, I would say there's a lot, at least like in my circles, of disenchantment with like the governmental system, with voting, with people's like rights. There was a lot of fear and confusion, or like I was gonna say like hatred that was kind of like coming up from this like, oh, I can't believe people voted that way. Oh, I can't believe this is happening again. Like, just like a lot of like that kind of energy and kind of feeling like, oh, like again, I thought that the voting system would work this one way, or I thought that like we were gonna have this very different future. And now that I see what we're gonna have, there's almost this like very avoidant kind of like pulling away. Um, which, yeah, I guess I talked about in the last card as well, of kind of being like, right, how do we, if we think about the Hanged One, how do we kind of allow things to happen around us and then still like stand by our own values and habits and systems that we want to do And like when we do that too much, right, which I think this card could be about, like what happens when you disengage so much that you're now unaware of what's going on or unaware of how it's impacting other people. It says things aren't happening in the way or timeline that you hoped, and there may be more fear to overcome before you're able to get what you want. Um, so yeah, there was this, I think, just kind of like feeling, at least in the US at the beginning of the year, again, at least like in the people I know, it was this very like, oh, I thought this was going to happen. It didn't happen. And like, now what? Like, how are we going to deal with this? What are we going to do? And there was this kind of like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so bad. And that really, it doesn't, the way that fear works is that often then we sort of stop again engaging, we stop trying different things. The hope feels gone. We feel very hopeless. And that makes people withdraw or, right, like for protection sometimes, or due to past trauma of knowing that, oh, when I engaged with the system and then it didn't work, it didn't change, it didn't work for me or do what it wanted me to do, well, fine, I'm just not going to engage then. But it is this sort of, I get it. And, right, like, I can definitely, I remember that kind of energy at the beginning of the year. And I think sort of the conclusion I came to, I remember after pulling all these cards for the prompt, was that like, we have to slow down, we have to be intentional, we have to create long-term vision. And I do think that that was achieved for folks this year. That was definitely achieved for me this year when I think of my business, when I think of doing the podcast all year, right? I sort of had this like, oh, I want to do this podcast. I want to call it Everyday Tarot. I'm going to do it every day for all of 2025. And just being like, all right, that's long term, right? That is like, I realize a year isn't always feel long term, but doing something every day for a year feels really long. And while I enjoyed it and while, right, I felt very committed to that vision and doing it, it did mean that, right, other things had to get put aside or I couldn't focus on them or, like I did slow down in other ways and I was intentional in other ways. And then also creating this vision for who do I want to work with? What do I want my colleagues to be like? What kind of energy do I want to go into? So that's what I think of there. I'll move on since I feel like I'm getting long already on what we're talking about. So for the third card, I pulled the Witch of Swords reverse. So upright, she's here. This is generally, usually the Knight of Swords. So this deck reimagines some of the traditionally male or masculine named characters or roles to be reimagined into female or more gender neutral terms. So this is the Witch of Swords. And when I look at it upright, I'm like, feels fairly powerful. We have this kind of like going into battle aspect. We have, oops, lying around. We have a bunch of pink roses. Like she looks like she's about to take action. She's holding these like flaming hearts in her hand, and then she has a sword in the other hand. And then we also see behind her some perhaps green leaves. It almost looks again like a snake, but I don't think it is. And the swords cards in this deck have clouds behind them as sort of the air type energy. So again, when I think of her in reverse, it's almost like, again, that we get kind of like things are getting turned upside down, right? How do we, if we think the clouds are now above us or we're within the clouds, are we up really high? Are we like where I live, where it's foggy, very down low, the clouds come in low, where like it rains very down low. We have fog that comes in the evenings with the high humidity and kind of all that wet air stays low. Is that what's going on? And so we're kind of like confused about where we are. I do think that this one is about like trying to figure out where you are in the scenario or different things. Like, what's your role? What do you want to do? What do you feel like is not for you? And again, this is all about the So generally the Knight card is associated with the air sign, and we have the swords as air signs. So we have air, air. So right, very airy here, but of course it is in reverse. So in reverse, it says, perhaps you're applying an excessive amount of force. You may just be too gung-ho. Your mind may be stuck on overdrive or an anxious rut. Take the time to think clearly to make the aligned decisions you deserve. Because upright, this is all about claiming like your power, your voice. Again, like you're like a knight going into battle, right? Here you're a witch. Kind of like witches are very, right? The whole thing is that they are empowered, right? Like, in my opinion, this is why the organized church or religion does not love witches, because it is this very like, oh no, my power comes from within myself, or my power comes from, right, the earth or the sky or the water. My power does not come from figures of authority or organized state systems. My power comes from within, and then I utilize things around me as a way to enact magic, perhaps, or witchcraft. Um, so, right, upright, this is all about like there's no limitations, right? Like you're just like flying in the sky, right? Air, air. You could do anything. And again, air is all like as an element is all about the mind, is all about the intellect, is all about right, sometimes overthinking, right? When our mind takes us too far into the future or too far into the what ifs, it's very hard to kind of like literally get grounded again. And so this, right, being in reverse, we're like an air, air, we're in the clouds, like literally, right? Like how we speak about daydreaming sometimes, as like maybe we got really focused on something, right? Again, for me, I could imagine like, oh, I got really focused on making this happen, or I got really focused on the podcast. And then like, what else maybe, right? Like had to get moved to the side because of that, or like where is there somewhere you're really trying to force things that is just not really working, right? Where we can kind of get very focused on a particular thing. Again, think like overthinking or anxiety, where we get very focused on like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen in the future? What about this? What about this? Instead of focusing on the present moment, right? This card is all about like, actually like what's going on like right now. And again, like I do think that I know for myself, there was this like right, I had the long-term goals. I was going to do this podcast all year. I have goals in my business. I had presentations I wanted to do. I wanted to get paid for a presentation, which I did do at least once this year. I wanted to be more in my community. I wanted to go to places where queer polyamorous people are, right? I went and had a booth at Tacoma Pride, talked about the podcast and pulled cards for folks and had crafting there, where I was doing a lot of things and going in like a lot of arenas also. And that was part of my full picture, was finding where do I, right, for my clientele and people I want to work with and the colleagues that I want to have, where are those people? And like how do I get in front of them, right, to being sort of intentional about, okay, yeah, Pride. That's where I go every year. So like, great, I'm gonna try to have a booth there. Or I wanted to present at Enchantress, which was changed this year to be General Fantasy Convention, but was historically a Harry Potter convention. And I wanted to present on tarot in fantasy and tarot in Harry Potter, because I think talking about divination there is very interesting. And really, I have a lot of thoughts having this podcast. Talk about tarot all the time, talk about divination, talk about different ways. And I wanted to talk about how is divination portrayed in the series. Even in a series of magic, divination is seen as, oh, like kind of pathetic, kind of like a scam. And that was really important to me to like dig into like why, how can they accept these forms of magic but not these ones? Or why is this seen, and why is being able to channel or tell the future or read people is seen as manipulative or scary. Even as a therapist, I feel like sometimes people have that portrayal of me as if like I am gleaning information from them that they don't want to share with me, which like could be true. And like, as a therapist, I know I'm in a position of power. And so it's very important to me to get consent from clients, to not push clients to a place they don't want to go, and to always be like checking in about like, how's this feel for people? Like, are you willing to do this? Do you want this? Like, do you want this insight that I think I have? Because also I believe that people know themselves the best. No one else in the world knows you better than you know yourself. And that's really important to me. So I also think about that with this card of swords, or the air sign, the intellect, the mind, that how do we treat our mind as some amount of information, but also not the highest information, not the most important. Because I think, at least in US society, and that there's a lot of like, oh, thoughts must be true. And if I say it with words, that's the only true way, that feelings don't matter, or feelings are not important, or feelings aren't to be taken seriously. And that's not a thing that I believe. So let's move into the next card, which is the Enchantress Reversed. So this is another reimagined card. So traditionally, this is the Magician. The Magician is associated with the number one. It's the number one card in the major arcana. It starts with the Fool, which is technically 0, and then 1 is the Magician traditionally. So these energies kind of overlap with each other. The Magician, again, kind of historically is all about like your true power, your purpose. Here it depicts goddess Kurukula. Which is all about, she's the Dakini of magic, enchantment, and enlightenment. In Buddhist traditions, the Dakinis are expressions of the erotic divine feminine in her role as wisdom keeper. Dakinis are not goddesses, but they can be worked with as deities and guides. Kurukula uses your attachments and desires to magnetize you towards conditions and experiences that help you find and follow your purpose. So this is all about, right, intention and purpose. Like, what is your purpose? What is your, some folks would say, like, vocation? What do you feel called to in this life, on this planet, in this year, even? So when we think about this card reversed, it says, step out of your ego, ask for help if you need it, and return to the innocence of the Fool. So again, like, this card was kind of about like, yes, you can find your own power, and using like things that are important to you and your purpose, and like is all about finding your spiritual path when it's upright. And I would say that kind of in reverse, it is saying like, you don't know everything. And you're not supposed to, right? You're not, you don't have to do things on your own. I think, again, like, I did this a bit with the podcast for a while. I was doing it all on my own, and it was very exhausting. I still do a good bit of it on my own, but then I hired someone to help me do the social media, like graphics, any graphics that are associated with the, like, what I post or on the website, that are pulled for the episodes, and then also doing the show notes, because that was very intensive energy for me, to have to kind of create the idea for the podcast episode, do the podcast episode, post the podcast episode, and then also create like the show notes of what I actually talked about. It was like 4 different levels of like talking about the same thing. And so that's been very helpful. I think I hired Kitty, my social media manager, in, I think we talked in April, maybe started in May. So you'll see if you go to my website that when I started getting help there, the images got a lot more interesting, and I could schedule things in advance. It also made me kind of have my own, like, okay, I have to get episodes done early so that I can send them to Kitty so that they can create the social, like the graphics, so they can do the show notes, and all of that can be ready to post on the day it needs to go out. So it made me work further ahead as well, which was helpful for me, which again, like, I I was doing it all on my own, would sometimes be like, oh, I'm gonna record an episode today. Guess I gotta do it right now and then post it. Which, like gotta do it sometimes to get my the consistency that I wanted done with the podcast. And like it doesn't necessarily create the best podcast episodes when I'm doing them like on that day and then posting it, and then they don't go out early in the day and they kind of go out later, which is less ideal for most people. And so I really think about like, yeah, like with the prompt with this one that I created from this card is, what is something you might need to ask for help with? And so I think for myself, like asking for help, it wasn't even asking necessarily, it was more like receiving and allowing help. Like I felt like there were arenas this year for me in which help arrived or kind of knocked at my door, perhaps, and that then in this year, I finally felt able to accept it. That happened in my like therapy world, that happened with the podcast, that happened with doing the full moon circles I've been talking about. I've been doing those with my colleague and friend Isabella. And it was super fun. I had been holding tarot events, social events, and meetups and stuff all on my own, and that was like fun for a while. But I wanted to do, when I started being able to do these kind of full moon circles and having another person there to help me do it during the time so I didn't have to hold the space all on my own or kind of hold the leadership role on my own. We could kind of split duties. They would do a bit more of the marketing stuff and do the astrology update things, and I would do more of the tarot and ritual side of our events, which you're going to check out. We have another one on the new year this year, on January 3rd this year. So if you want to check that out, probably for the future, we have yet to announce it, but we're probably going to be moving online for a bit to see what that is like. So if you're not local, you can look forward to perhaps being able to actually join and experience our full moon circles together that way. But yeah, I finally felt like, oh, okay, like I think for me, I there was sort of this experience in my business and where I was, where it was like, okay, I tried to work with other people and it really didn't work for me. And then I sort of went the opposite end of the spectrum. It was like, I have to do everything on my own. That's the only way it's going to happen. That's the only way I can have boundaries. That's the only way I can do it. That works for me. And then I did that for a while, for a couple of years. And then this year, and even a little bit started in fall of 2023, no, fall of 2024, because this year was 2025. Fall of 2024, I finally was like, okay, what would it look like if I did do contract work for someone? If I did, yeah, think about, okay, what would happen if I do want to do this intensive, energetic thing of creating the podcast and doing it kind of all on my own for a while? Like, what would that look like? And being able to not have to find as many clients because I was doing contract work and they do a lot of that. I mostly get to show up and see therapy clients, and that was really nice. So like basically handing that off, part of it, to someone else, let me then be able to explore other things. So to actually utilize some of the like ideas and energy that I really wanted to in kind of non-therapeutic arenas, like doing a podcast, like doing events, doing full moon circles, doing tarot stuff, doing presentations. It really like alleviated a lot of the emotional energy I was spending on like, oh, I can't get enough clients. Oh, the business is not where I want it to be. Freed that up, that I was like, wow, okay, I can actually like do all these things that I wanted to do that just felt like a slog before. It felt like, oh, I have all this energy and then I kind of like can't do all of the pieces needed to make it happen, right? To like market it and then get people to the event and then do the event and then have it afterwards and have that like work for me and get some money from it, or some future clients or some newsletter subscribers or people listening to the podcast. Like, yeah, it just made me really think that like, oh yeah, okay, this year for me was actually spent like giving help where I could, right? And then also receiving or like actually allowing people to help me. And I feel like that was like a theme throughout. And I think this year in the US, like a lot of people experience like, oh, actually, like my governmental system is not working for me. And it's not working for a lot of people. And so how can I both help and receive help from my neighbors, from my friends, from family, from things that are not this large system, but that are smaller systems, or mutual aid, or doing things in your community, doing community gardens, like just different kinds of ways of utilizing our energy and not always having, or sometimes that when we can't rely on the big system of government, of country, of whatever it is, that then we're forced to kind of explore, okay, like, can I help my neighbor out? How do I do this? How do I do that? And then it kind of makes us think differently and perhaps act differently. And that, I'm not saying that it's all good, right? Having to do things because your government literally is not going to pay for food stamps anymore, like, is not ideal. And I think it really pushed a lot of people to say, okay, like, the government's not going to provide that in this way. I still want to make sure that people that need food, that kids that need food, that need access to things, that people have them. How can I help do that on a smaller scale? And if we all do that in our own communities, we don't necessarily need certain things from our government to do that, even though perhaps in some ideal world that would be happening. So let's go ahead and look at the last card, which was the Five of Wands in reverse, which here depicts a cobra, snake of some kind, and 5 roses, which is how the wands are depicted in this deck, that are kind of on fire. And then we also see lots of like, what I would say are like blood spatters is what it looks like. So fives are almost always about conflict or challenge, like we are in the middle, feeling stuck perhaps, or if we think about from ace to 10, if that's a microcosm for the major arcana journey, the 0 to 21 cards in major arcana, the hero's journey, from ace to 10, we have the microcosm of it, and fives would be in the middle. So, right, when you often are in the middle of a book or in the middle of a project you're working on, or it's very hard to see like, how is this ever going to get done? How am I going to make it? How am I going to expend this much energy that I need to do? What is that like? And this card is all, so wands are about activation energy. And yeah, here, right, we think of like roses, flames, spitting cobra, and blood, are all highly energetic beings. All of those things. Intensity, right? Like, are kind of what I get from this card in the upright position. So if we think about, oh, wow, I flipped right to the page. With the card in reverse, it says, take a long needed break from the conflict at hand. You must see the path ahead, learn how to communicate so you can move forward with the knowledge of love in your heart. That is the reversal definition. So upright, the 5 of Wands is associated with Saturn in Leo. So Saturn being about discipline, rigidity sometimes, and Leo being about kind of like full expression, full fire energy, right? And wands are fire energy, Leo's fire energy. That is an intensity here, right? Like a spark, creating a fire. Again, cobras are also very intense. They're very long snakes, they're very venomous snakes, they can be very aggressive, unlike a lot of snakes. And so upright, it says, if your nerves are tense, your anxiety is high, and you feel like you're at a standstill, try breathing into your heart center. The fives are some of the toughest cards in the deck because they embody the firepower of Mars and its sometimes uncontrollable aggression. In the realm of the wands, this firepower becomes extra combustible, right? We have fire sign and the fives are fire, necessitating an inner sense of peace and centeredness to understand how to navigate the situation at hand. There's a battle raging, beloved, but that doesn't mean you need to succumb to violence or petty tactics. In lust and love, communication is key. Yes, you're fighting now, but for what? And I think that was when I think about, right, in reversal, it's obviously going to be slightly different, but like the what are we fighting for? Like, and not even just like conflict fighting, but like, what do you care about, right? What do you want to put your energy towards? What do you want from this year, right? I think, again, like, I know I spent a lot of this year being like, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna try this, kind of like following a lot of those things that I wanted to do. And now I'm kind of in the right at the end of the sort of Gregorian calendar year. As we look into the next year of 2026, it's kind of like, okay, I tried a lot of things, right? I did a lot of intensity. I flew across the country to do a presentation. Like I said, I went to Tacoma Pride and had really fun there, but it's also very high and like we spent like 12 hours to set up for Pride, to get there early, to be there for like the 6 hours, and then also to break everything down after. And it's like in the height of summer, like it's a lot of energy expansion, which again, fire energy is all about. But it also helps us to be like, yeah, what do you need to take a break from, right? If you're going to put a lot of energy into certain things, what are you not going to put energy into? What do you want to be intentional about? And again, if you have a lot of energy at a certain time, like in summer, where I live, we have like 16 hours of sunlight in the summertime, sometimes more. And that's a long day, right? Pride was 12 hours. That was a long day. Being on your feet the whole time, we're right, talking to people, being around a lot of sound and sensory stuff. So yeah, I just think of this card of being like, okay, there's intense things again happening around you. There's intense things perhaps that you want to do or like you want to use your energy towards. How are you going to communicate what you want, right? How are you going to like plan ahead, right? Because again, like I spend a lot of energy in summer. I was traveling, I was doing like presentations like almost every month throughout the summertime arena. And then, right, you have to then get to winter, like I am here, and be like, whew, right, we're gonna take a deep breath, we're gonna pause. I'm technically off work all of this week, so I'm not seeing clients, although I am putting out the podcast and I'm reviewing my year. I'm trying to be intentional and try to think about what do I want to do next year, right? What are the things that I liked about what intensity did I enjoy? What felt worth it? And right, because some things like they might sound really good, and then when you actually go and you actually are there for 12 hours, or you actually go to the party, or you actually do it, it's like, I don't know, didn't quite live up to what I wanted. That can be frustrating. But it also feels like, right, we have to think about what are you fighting for? Like, again, when we think about sort of the greater political system in the US, it's like, okay, like, yeah, maybe the voting didn't go how you wanted, and maybe like the president is not who you wanted. Um, but how are you going to communicate that? Are you going to call your senators and representation every day? Are you going to go out into your community and make sure that people are being fed and have housing and shelter and warmth? Like what parts are important to you? And then how are you actually going to do it, right? How do you, because the benefit of a governmental system is that they have very large means of communication with people. Maybe not the same ones that we had historically, like press conferences, but communicating things in the paper, on the news, or the military, right? Like they have a lot of large systems that they can enact. And then when we are one person on our local level, like we have to figure out like how do I communicate things to my community or to the people I care about um, in a way that they're actually going to hear it and that they know that I'm there for them. So again, that like what you're fighting now before what? Like what are you fighting for? What do you want to be known for? What do you want people to get away from interactions with you, like to take away with them, to remember about you? And that, yeah, there is just this very like, okay, right, this card's all about fire, energy, right? Creating things. But who and what are you going to create for? And then also, right, like when is it enough? When is it too much? When are you burned out, right? Because again, we have a lot of fire analogies with energy, like being burned out, right? That's a fire. When a fire is burned out, it means it has no fuel left and it cannot continue flames. It might still be warm, it might still be crinkling and crackling, but it's not going to be the large outward energy that it looks like. It's going to be storing its energy in the coals, right? And the charcoal into things that will maybe simmer, right, for a bit or continues to smoke or have some warmth, but, right, it has burned out or it has no more fuel to continue burning. So when you don't have any fuel left anymore, right, and maybe that's in relationship with someone, or maybe that's again in where you live or with certain systems, like when do you take a break for you? And then how do you know when to come back? How do you know like what's important to you and what you want to do? I feel like I'm starting to preach here, so I'm going to try to wrap it up. So that's kind of how I see this review of the cards I pulled for 2025 and the prompts. Next episode, I'm going to talk about the actual prompts that came up from these cards. And then I'm going to pull 5 cards to talk about. Okay, right. We had the question of what are you refusing to see an alternative to? What's the card now? Like, how did that happen for me? How did that happen for us? What's the card now that says, like, how do you allow for flexibility in those ways? How do you do this? Because again, I think I used these cards to create prompts for you to go on and pull cards on your own. And now I'm going to be right here today. I'm talking about being podcast host. Tomorrow's episode, I'm going to talk about being podcast listener and be like, okay, I heard this spread right from someone. I created it. Okay, how do I do it in my own life? How do I know how to interpret the cards? Because I think that's really important too. You know, I share a lot of how I interpret certain cards, but there's so many decks, there's so many situations. I think it's important to have like transparency about, okay, how would I do that too? So let's go ahead and dive in and pull a card for today to see what the cards have to say today on this topic of 2025 tarot spread in review. And see, what do they have to say? What other message do we need to know right now? Is there anything I've gone into the next episode that I need to pay attention to or to think about? All right, I'm pulling from the Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle today, illustrated by Giada Rose and by Lorraine Anderson and Juliet Diaz. And I pulled the Voices card, and it says, with a tug at the gut, feel them romance your very breath. Listen to the gentle flickering within your eyes, for this is where they guide. And I did pull it in reverse, but I don't. Okay, so this deck does have reversal definitions, so I will show it to you in reverse here. So I will read the reversal for this. Voices. So upright, it's about encouragement and inner knowing. Feels appropriate that I pulled all reversals for this pull earlier this year, and we're still pulling a reversal now. It says, sometimes trying too hard to hear the guidance is what destroys the magic. Wait for the answers to appear rather than searching for them. Advice is often offered when we least expect it. Keep an open mind. Don't miss these powerful signs because you're too busy expecting your guidance to come in a different way. Trust in spirit and guidance. To offer guidance in a way that serves your highest good, you will come to understand when the time is right. So it's a very like, don't force it energy there. Right, it's saying, okay, again, I know I've been feeling this like, oh, it's the new year soon. Like, oh, I'm supposed to like got my goals for next year. What am I doing? What am I creating? But really, like in the witches here, Samhain, right? This deck here at the end of October is generally the witches' new year. So, right, which is kind of like if we think about it in the cyclical cycle way, that is a time of like sort of like grief and reflection, right? Like communicating with the dead, communicating with your ancestors, your guides, like thinking about what am I doing this year? Like, what am I? And so, right, we're kind of in if that started at the end of October, we've had November, we've had most of December, but we still actually, in my opinion, get all of January to think about what do I want to do this year? And I think in the Gregorian calendar, which is the like January 1st is the new year calendar, it can feel so terrible in a lot of ways to make goals in the middle of winter or like technically the beginning of winter if we just had winter solstice on the 21st or around that date, right? It's been like a week and it's like, what are your goals? And I'm like, bro, let me chill. I need like a whole another month of like marination was what I was gonna say to think about that. And I think like that's what this card is saying, right? Like actually you don't need to have your New Year's resolutions already. Like it's really hard for people to create new intentions in January in the coldest time of year in most places in the Northern Hemisphere, like January, February, at least where I live, that's the coldest time of year. When you're in the most hibernation in the darkest time of year, you have no real holidays to look forward to. Maybe Valentine's Day, maybe, depending on your relationship and how that's going and whether you're in one or that kind of thing or whether you feel that way. But there's like, just feels kind of dark and dreary. So I would say, right, this card saying like, be open, right, to the messages you're going to receive, to the voices, right, the things that are communicating with you, people that are communicating with you, guides that are communicating with you, and don't force that because actually it's okay to like not have your long-term vision right now for the whole rest of next year. It's okay if you spend quarter one or the first 3 months of the year thinking about what do I actually want to do this year? What feels sustainable as a habit? What do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? Um, and that's kind of what I say, what I think of with this card. So links for the tarot decks I talk about will always be in the show notes and on my website if you want to look at them or purchase them. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast comes out every day, Monday through Friday for all of 2025. And I will be talking about what is 2026 going to look like in terms of that schedule in an upcoming episode. You can email me, me@CamilleASaunders.com with your thoughts, questions, and more. All right, see you soon. Bye-bye.